Late November 2025, a message appears, not through diplomatic channels, not through formal briefings, through social media. To all airlines, pilots, drug dealers, and human traffickers, please consider the airspace above and surrounding Venezuela to be closed in its entirety. The language is direct. The signature, Donald Trump. Behind the words, the USS Gerald Ford, America's most advanced aircraft carrier, positioned off Venezuela's coast. 15,000 troops, spy planes, B-52 bombers are conducting what the Pentagon calls attack demonstrations. Over 90 people have died from U.S. strikes on vessels in international waters since September. No congressional authorization, no formal declaration, just escalation. To understand why an American president is publicly threatening to close another nation's airspace, you must first understand something darker. How Venezuela's economy didn't simply collapse, how it mutated. How a nation holding the world's largest oil reserves transformed into something that survives not despite its dysfunction, but because of it. You must understand what happens when states don't fall, when they adapt. You must understand how Venezuela became a narco-state. December 2025, the largest American military buildup in the Caribbean since the Cuban Missile Crisis. The facts are documented. Since September, U.S. forces have conducted over 20 strikes on vessels they claim carry drugs. Approximately 90 people were killed. No international warrants issued. No evidence was presented publicly. Just action. On December 10th, American forces boarded a Venezuelan oil tanker, the Skipper, in international waters. Attorney General Pam Bondi released footage. Helicopters, repelling agents, military choreography designed for cameras. Trump called it the largest tanker ever seized. Days later, new sanctions. Venezuela's nephews, convicted drug traffickers previously pardoned under Biden, were blacklisted again. 6 oil shipping companies are designated. Venezuela's maritime access strangled. The designation came on November 24th. The Cartel de los Soles, the Cartel of the Suns, is labeled a foreign terrorist organization. Not a traditional cartel, not a hierarchical structure like Medellin or Sinaloa, something different. A term experts describe as journalistic shorthand for military corruption that became systematic. The name comes from the sun insignias on Venezuelan generals' uniforms. The designation matters legally. Terrorist organizations can be targeted militarily without declaring war, without congressional approval. The framework already exists. Maduro responds with theater, wielding Simón Bolívar's sword, calling for mobilization, warning that Venezuela will defend every inch. But the sword is symbolic, the mobilization questionable. Both men understand what this is really about. Oil sits beneath Venezuelan soil, 303 billion barrels, the world's largest proven reserves. In a functional state, Venezuela could supply the Western Hemisphere. Instead, production collapsed from 3 million barrels daily to under 800,000. But this isn't primarily about oil waiting to be extracted. It's about something more immediate, more destabilizing. It's about what replaced Venezuela's failed economy, what grew in the vacuum when legitimacy disappeared. The question everyone asks, will Trump invade? Most Americans oppose military action. Polls show roughly 70% against intervention, yet Trump's language grows darker. Land strikes are coming very soon, he tells troops on Thanksgiving. Behind closed doors, the White House drafts contingency plans. What happens when Maduro falls? Who takes power? How to fill the vacuum? The machinery of regime change turning quietly. But to understand why any of this is happening, you need to go back, to see how wealth becomes poverty, how poverty becomes crime, how crime becomes government. Venezuela was not always broken. In the 1970s, it was Latin America's richest nation. Oil wealth flooded Caracas. The middle class expanded. Universities thrived. The future looked bright. Then the 1980s arrived. Oil prices collapsed. The economy contracted year after year. By 1998, GDP per capita had fallen to 1963 levels. 30.5 decades of progress erased. Into this came Hugo Chavez, a failed coup leader with charisma, a populist with revolutionary language. In 1999, he won the presidency, and oil prices saved him. Between 2000 and 2013, oil prices soared. Venezuela received what economists calculated as the equivalent of 3 Marshall Plans in inflation-adjusted dollars in Chavez spent it all. Food subsidies, free education, healthcare expansion, poverty and unemployment were cut in half. But underneath, there is rot. Chavez nationalized the oil industry, replaced experienced engineers with political loyalists. PDVSA, once professionally managed, became bloated, corrupt. Production began falling even as prices rose. By 2013, oil represented 98% of Venezuela's exports. No diversification, no savings, no contingency. When Chavez died in March 2013, his successor, Nicolás Maduro, inherited an economy built on a single assumption: oil prices would stay high forever. They didn't. 2014, oil prices collapsed. From over $100 per barrel to below $30. Venezuela's revenue evaporated overnight. Maduro's response was to print money. Hyperinflation followed. Not gradual, catastrophic. The numbers tell the story. 2014, 69% inflation, the highest in the world. 2015, 181%. 2016, 800%. Venezuela entered formal hyperinflation in November 2016, when monthly inflation exceeded 50% for 30 consecutive days. Then acceleration. 2017, 4,000%. 2018, over 130,000% by some estimates. The central bank stopped publishing figures. Independent economists calculated rates approaching 2 million% by early 2019. The bolivar became worthless. Life savings erased overnight. Salaries became meaningless before they could be spent. By 2021, 95% of Venezuelans lived in poverty, 77% in extreme poverty. Supermarkets emptied. Hospitals ran out of basic medicine. Venezuelans lost an average of 19 pounds between 2015 and 2016, not from lifestyle changes, from hunger. The economy contracted by roughly 80% between 2013 and 2021, a collapse comparable only to war-torn nations, Iraq, Bosnia, Lebanon. But Venezuela experienced this during peacetime, under a single government. Approximately 8 million people fled, nearly 1/4 of the entire population, walking to Colombia, Peru, Chile, the United States, the largest displacement crisis in Latin American history. And in the abandoned airports, the desperate ports, the collapsing institutions, something else began growing. Criminal networks, not imported, homegrown, born from the wreckage of a failed state. This is where narco-states come from, not from cartels invading governments, but from governments becoming cartels. The Cartel of the Suns. The name first emerged in 1993. 2 National Guard generals investigated for drug trafficking. The emblems on their uniforms gave prosecutors and journalists a label. But what exists now is different. Experts studying Venezuelan corruption describe it not as a traditional cartel, not a hierarchical organization like Medellin or Sinaloa, but as systematic military corruption. Multiple cells, semi-independent operations, each profiting from Venezuela's strategic geography. Venezuela shares a border with Colombia, the world's largest cocaine producer, Caribbean coastline, hundreds of remote airstrips, and crucially, a military with control over territory, intelligence, and logistics. After the economic collapse, military officials faced a choice: poverty on official salaries rendered worthless by hyperinflation, or crime. Many chose adaptation. The mechanics are documented in U.S. indictments, international reports, and defector testimony. Colombian producers move cocaine to Venezuelan military-controlled zones. Corrupt officials provide protection. Abandoned airstrips launch flights to Central America, Honduras, Guatemala, and Mexico. From there, the United States. Maritime routes expanded. Go-fast boats, fishing vessels with hidden cargo, container ships with compartments designed for concealment. High-ranking officials coordinated with Colombian guerrilla groups, with Mexican cartels, creating supply chains that bypassed traditional enforcement. In March 2020, the U.S. Justice Department indicted Maduro and 14 Venezuelan officials on narco-terrorism charges. The accusation using state institutions to facilitate multi-ton cocaine imports into America. Tarek El Assami, Venezuela's former vice president, was sanctioned in 2017 for facilitating shipments. Nestor Rivero, military intelligence chief, indicted for tipping off traffickers. Diosdado Cabello, National Assembly president, accused of cartel leadership. Whether these constitute a single organization remains disputed. Insight Crime, which studies organized crime in Latin America, describes the Cartel of the Suns as a series of normally disconnected cells embedded within the Venezuelan military. Phil Gunson of the International Crisis Group told CNN it's a journalistic expression created to refer to the involvement of Venezuelan authorities in drug trafficking. The U.S. Drug Administration has never formally described it as a drug trafficking organization in its annual assessments. Neither has the UN Office on Drugs and Crime. But drug trafficking isn't the only revenue stream. Gold smuggling. Venezuela's reserves were stolen and sold on the black market. Fuel smuggling. Heavily subsidized gasoline is smuggled to Colombia and sold at a profit. Currency manipulation through black market dollars and shadow banking. When U.S. sanctions intensified, the regime adapted again. Shadow fleets transporting oil to buyers who ignored legality, evading sanctions through shell companies and middlemen. A loyal circle profited immensely. They have no incentive to remove Maduro. International warrants await many of them. His survival is their survival. This is how systems adapt under pressure, not by reform, by mutation. But in all this, why does America care? First, the drugs. An estimated 400 tons of cocaine transit through Venezuelan territory annually, according to various estimates. Not the primary source, Mexico produces more, but a significant route was enabled by government complicity. Second, migration. 8 million Venezuelans are currently displaced. Many are attempting to reach the United States. A humanitarian crisis that became a political crisis at the border. Third, oil. Venezuela holds the world's largest proven oil reserves, 303 billion barrels. In a functional state, Venezuela could be a major Western Hemisphere supplier. Instead, production collapsed from 3 million barrels per day to under 800,000. Fourth, geopolitics. Maduro's alliances concern Washington. Russia sends military advisors. China provides financial support. Cuba supplies intelligence agents. Iran helps evade oil sanctions. Venezuela became a refuge for anti-US actors in America's hemisphere. Fifth, the fear of stability. Paradoxically, Washington doesn't just want Maduro gone, it fears he might actually stabilize, that his criminal economy might work, that he might prove authoritarian narco-states can survive indefinitely. Because if Maduro survives, others might follow the model. Economic collapse plus criminal revenue equals regime survival, a blueprint for failed states everywhere. The stakes aren't just Venezuelan, they're systemic. Trump's obsession with Maduro didn't start in 2025. It began in his first presidency. January 2019, Trump refused to recognize Maduro's second-term inauguration. Instead, he recognized Juan Guaidó, president of the opposition-controlled National Assembly, as Venezuela's legitimate president. Over 50 countries followed America's lead. For a moment, it seemed Maduro might fall. He didn't. Trump imposed crushing sanctions. Oil exports targeted. Officials blacklisted. Banks were frozen out of international systems. The strategy? Maximum pressure. Make the economy hurt until Maduro's allies turn on him. It failed. May 2020, Operation Gideon. Former Green Berets and Venezuelan dissidents attempted an armed incursion. They were captured within hours. Maduro paraded them on television. Trump denied involvement. Nobody believed him. Throughout Trump's first term, threats. All options are on the table, meaning military intervention, meaning regime change. He never pulled the trigger. Too risky, too expensive, too much like Iraq. When Biden took office, the approach softened. Negotiations, conditional sanctions relief. Chevron allowed limited operations, an attempt at diplomacy that achieved little. Maduro won a third election in July 2024, widely regarded as fraudulent. Opposition leader Edmundo Gonzalez almost certainly won, but Maduro refused to leave. Arrested opponents, forced Maria Corina Machado, the opposition's most popular leader, later awarded the Nobel Peace Prize, into hiding. Trump returned to power in January 2025 with unfinished business. Within weeks, sanctions reimposed, harder than before. the terrorist designation for cartel of the souls. But this time, Trump added something new, not threats, action. September 2025, the first boat strike. 11 people were killed. Trump claimed they were Tren de Aragua gang members. No evidence was provided publicly. The strikes continued. Over 20 operations, approximately 90 dead, boats destroyed in the Caribbean and Pacific. The administration claims they carried drugs. Journalists and legal experts demand proof. None comes into detail. Trump's approach is psychological. Domination through overwhelming display. Show force until Maduro's allies question whether supporting him is worth dying for. It's a strategy built on spectacle, not gradual pressure. Overwhelming displays designed to break morale. The question, will it work? November 30th, 2025, Trump's airspace declaration. What triggered this specific escalation? Timing reveals context. December 2024, Maria Corina Machado was awarded the Nobel Peace Prize while in hiding. International recognition for the opposition, pressure on Maduro to negotiate. Instead, he dug in. His message? I survived your first presidency. I'll survive your second. Behind the scenes, U.S. intelligence assessments. Venezuela's shadow economy is stabilizing. Gold and oil revenue, though diminished, are keeping the regime afloat. Military loyalty holding. Cuban and Russian support is steady. The fear in Washington, Maduro might actually make it. The narco-state model might prove viable. Trump's airspace threat signals a shift. Not just sanctions, not just boat strikes, preparation for something larger. GPS interference over Venezuela is increasing. Navigation systems disrupted. Commercial aviation is growing dangerously. Airlines are canceling flights. The FAA warns pilots of potentially hazardous situations. Venezuela responds with defiance, but hints at dialogue. Reports emerge, unconfirmed, that Trump spoke with Maduro by phone, possibly exploring off-ramps, possibly testing willingness to negotiate. The psychological game continues. Trump maintains pressure while leaving doors slightly open. Maduro acts tough publicly while perhaps seeking exits privately. But neither man can truly compromise. Trump wants regime change. Maduro wants survival. These goals cannot coexist. 3 scenarios exist, maybe 4. Scenario 1, containment without invasion. More sanctions, continued strikes, airspace restrictions. Squeeze until internal fractures emerge. Military defections, elite abandonment. The problem? It hasn't worked yet. Maduro's inner circle is too invested in the criminal economy. International warrants await them. Survival means keeping Maduro in power. Scenario 2, limited military action. Strikes on infrastructure, airstrips destroyed, ports targeted. Trump calls it counter-narcotics operations, avoids the word invasion. The advantage? Political cover. Americans might support fighting drugs even if they oppose regime change. Legal justification through the terrorist designation already exists. The risk? Escalation. Venezuelan military might respond. Russian and Chinese reactions are uncertain. Regional allies, Colombia, Brazil, are already skeptical. Scenario 3, full regime change, direct intervention, special forces operations, decapitation strikes targeting Maduro and top officials, installation of the opposition government. The Trump administration has drafted plans. What happens day after? How to stabilize? Who takes charge? Oil industry recovery, humanitarian aid deployment. The advantage? Decisiveness. End the problem immediately. Install a friendly government. Secure oil supplies. Eliminate criminal networks. The risk? Everything. Military occupation, guerrilla resistance, humanitarian catastrophe, another Iraq, another Afghanistan, except in America's hemisphere. A nation of 30 million with destroyed infrastructure, armed militias, and criminal networks embedded in every institution. Rebuilding would cost hundreds of billions, take decades, require sustained commitment, which American voters won't support. But there's a fourth scenario nobody discusses openly.
Maduro survives. The pressure continues. The criminal economy adapts again. Military loyalty holds. Russian and Chinese support continues. Years pass. Trump leaves office eventually. The administration changes its approach. Maduro endures. Because history shows, authoritarian regimes with criminal revenue streams are harder to overthrow than anyone expects. They don't need legitimacy, they need cash, and Venezuela's networks generate enough to survive. The Venezuelan people pay the price: continued poverty, continued exodus, continued suffering. 8 million have already fled. Millions more might follow. The regional crisis deepens. Neighboring countries overwhelmed, and the model proves itself, not through success, through survival.
Here's what nobody wants to say directly. Maduro didn't accidentally build a narco-state. He built it deliberately, systematically. Because when everything else failed, when the economy collapsed, when legitimacy disappeared, when institutions crumbled, crime remained. And crime works. Not for the Venezuelan people. For them, it's catastrophic. Poverty at scales difficult to comprehend, hunger, displacement, suffering that shows in the statistics of lives erased. But for the regime, crime provides what legitimate governance couldn't: revenue without accountability, power without consent, survival without popularity. This is the lesson of Venezuela. Economic collapse doesn't automatically produce regime change. Sometimes it produces a mutation. The state doesn't die, it transforms into something more durable, more criminal. Trump understands this. His escalation isn't really about stopping cocaine from reaching American streets. It's about preventing the model from succeeding, from proving that criminal states can endure indefinitely. But intervention carries risks America has experienced before. Iraq, Afghanistan, Libya. The results documented: instability, insurgency, prolonged conflict. Venezuela would be similar. Maybe worse, a nation with destroyed infrastructure, armed groups, and criminal networks embedded everywhere. So we're left with this standoff: Trump threatening, Maduro defying. Both are locked in a game that neither can win cleanly. And the Venezuelan people remain caught between them, between a leader who abandoned democracy for crime and an American president who might intervene, with consequences nobody can predict. 8 million already voted with their feet, walking away from the wreckage, starting over in foreign lands, sending money back to families who couldn't leave. Maybe you're watching this from one of those places: Colombia, Peru, Chile, the United States. Maybe you left Venezuela yourself. Or maybe you're watching from somewhere else entirely, wondering what happens when states stop failing and start adapting. The tragedy isn't that Venezuela collapsed. Many nations have collapsed. The tragedy is what it became afterwards. A system that survives not despite being broken, but because it learned to profit from the break. Maduro didn't build a narco-state by accident. He built it to survive. And now we're all waiting to see, can overwhelming American power destroy what desperation created? Or will Venezuela's criminal evolution prove stronger than intervention? The answer isn't coming through diplomatic cables or official statements. It's coming through what happens next, through actions, not words. Through whether Trump follows through, whether Maduro miscalculates, whether the Venezuelan people ever get to decide their own future. The machinery is in motion, the pieces positioned. What remains is watching how systems adapt under the ultimate pressure, whether they break or whether they survive.